Welcome, everybody. It is my distinguished pleasure to welcome Dr. Jessica Coker, who is an alumni of Centenary College from 2008. She is now an associate professor at the University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences. She serves in the Department of Psychiatry and Obstetrics and Gynecology. She is the medical director of the psychiatric inpatient units and the co-director of the Women's Mental Health Program, and was recently voted as Chief of Staff-elect for the University of Arkansas Medical Sciences Health. Is that a congratulations or I'm sorry?
Both.
Both, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Dr. Coker's expertise lies in psychiatric disorders during pregnancy and the postpartum period. She has received multiple grants focusing on substance use disorders during the prenatal period, most recently working as a co-investigator on the Healthy Brain and Child Development Study in partnership with the NIH. As medical director of the Women's Inpatient Unit at the University of Arkansas Medical Sciences Psychiatric Research Institute, Dr. Coker provides acute care to women with acute psychiatric illness. She is also an awarded educator, mentoring and teaching residents and students who rotate through her unit. In her role as Chief of Staff-elect, she collaborates with the University of Arkansas Medical Sciences senior leadership to develop, monitor, and advocate for clinical practices through the hospital medical board, focusing on quality improvement and credentialing. Dr. Coker is consistently honored as a Best Healthcare Professional and Best Women in Healthcare by AY Magazine, and as a Little Rock Top Doc by Soiree Magazine. She is dedicated to the improving of the psychiatric treatment of women across Arkansas and the region by advocating for increased access to treatment, removing barriers to treatment for pregnant and postpartum women, and providing evidence-based care. Outside of work, she enjoys reading and traveling, especially with her husband and 8-year-old daughter, Evelyn. I will say Dr. Coker was one of my first students to take all of my classes here at Centenary, including my module, and I'm now trying to work to recruit her daughter to Centenary. A little early, but she seems to love biology and animals, so I think I've got it in. Please help me in welcoming Dr. Jessica Coker.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to thank Dr. Shearhart and the selection committee and the organizers of this committee for putting so much work into it. And thank you for inviting me to speak here today. To say it is an honor is an understatement. I was literally shocked when I just got this random email from Dr. Shearhart. Haven't talked to him in many, many years, saying, can you come speak and be a keynote speaker? I was like, wait, are you sure? Are you really inviting me? Like, why me? It has been 20 years since I started my journey here at Centenary, and to not only be remembered but to be recognized for things that I've accomplished since then is beyond humbling. I'm truly grateful to be back here on campus today, see the projects that you and the students have been working on, and hopefully pass on some of the wisdom I have learned along my journey from college to academic medicine. But first, I want to start with a story that takes me back to 2007. When Dr. Shearhart led my May module trip to Nicaragua. By the way, I'm jealous that some of you will be going to New Zealand soon, so I have one question. Are you staying in a place with electricity and running water? Okay, good. You should check first because neither one of those things existed in where we stayed for 10 days. I was extremely happy when I got to come back and blow dry my hair and take a warm shower. Otherwise, it was collected rainwater is what we used to shower. Okay, back to the story. I wonder if he recalls the night that I woke up the entire house screaming at the top of my lungs at like 1 o'clock in the morning. I also didn't mention that the walls were like just things that had 4-inch gaps between the ceiling and the floor, so there was no real wall, so everybody could hear everything in the house. But anyways, I was yelling at the top of my lungs because I thought there was a bat that had gotten underneath my mosquito net. As it turns out, the bat may have been a vivid dream, probably induced by sleep deprivation, too much alcohol, and Dr. Shearhart consistently playing Welcome to the Jungle on repeat. So fair warning to y'all about to go on a trip with him. My trip to Nicaragua was memorable for other reasons too. I was raised on a farm in a rural town of 2,000 people in Arkansas. And this was my first opportunity to leave the United States. I remember being most interested in people and social situations in Nicaragua, even more so than the biology of the jungle. I apologize. I was struck by the poverty we encountered, the kids begging for money on the street. It is one thing to read about global inequality and cultural differences. It is another thing entirely to experience that culture firsthand, to look those kids in the eyes and acknowledge them. This learning experience is one of the many things I appreciate about my time at Centenary, and though I didn't recognize it at the time, led me on my current career path. Being from a small town, even moving to Shreveport, pushed me out of my comfort zone. I did not know a single person as I crossed the state line into Louisiana, but I quickly learned that in Louisiana, drive-through daiquiri stations are a thing, and I discovered the mischief that goes on at Superior Bar and Grill. Very well, by the way. But those stories are for a different day. I'm forever grateful to Centenary for the friendships that were forged and the many professors who shaped my career into what it is today, which I will discuss specific examples later on. Today we hear from students and faculty sharing the results of their hard work, sweat, and sometimes tears. As you reflect on these research findings and data, I challenge you to consider the sense of curiosity and the connection to other people that made each possible. I will share with you my own sense of both of these during this time we have together and how they have impacted me as a medical student, a psychiatrist, and now an associate professor teaching medical students and residents on a daily basis. I'm also continuing to lean into this curiosity and connection in my role as the incoming chief of staff at UAMS, which is the only academic medical center in Arkansas, which many Centenary grads have gone on to complete their own medical training and will hopefully continue to. First, curiosity. As you decide what to major in and what to focus your research projects on, you ask yourself questions. What sort of work do I enjoy doing? What will I do after college? Can I get a job? Will this ever end? And I'm sure many others. As college students, you are asked to wonder at the world around us, the biological systems, the chemical compositions, the history of our society, the culture of another country. All throughout, I would guess you also find yourself wondering about yourself. Where do I fit amidst it all? Where do I find meaning? What energizes me in life? I ask you to embrace this sense of curiosity about yourself. These years you have at Centenary, use them to explore. Say yes to opportunity, to new experiences. Surgeon and writer Atul Gawande recommends we say yes to everything before you're 40 and say no to everything after you're 40. He goes on to explain, in your formative years, you don't know, you can't know what will ultimately matter to you, what will grab you by the shoulders and awaken you and stay with you. So you have to be open to trying stuff, to saying yes. Even learning that you don't like something is as useful as it gives you the opportunity to explore why that thing isn't for you. Beyond my parents forcing me to try new foods growing up, I recall my first experience of asking myself these questions was at a 6th grade career fair. And after listening to a neonatologist talk about caring for the tiniest of humans, I was hooked and set off on the journey to becoming a neonatologist. I earned my bachelor's degree here at Centenary, as you know, and then I returned home to Arkansas for medical school. There was no second guessing or turning back. It never even occurred to me that I could do something else. I finished the first 2 grueling years of medical school, notorious for a lot of boring PowerPoints at the time, and finally made it to clinical specialty rotations. At long last, I was standing in Arkansas Children's Hospital, taking my first steps in the world where I planned to distinguish myself and eventually be a real doctor. Except as time went on, I found myself dreading the rotation. I did not enjoy it at all. I was too blunt to communicate with the parents of my pediatric patients. I learned that I don't like being touched by acquaintances, and I don't enjoy interacting with bodily fluids, which I know going into medical school, you might not have guessed that, but I learned that. I also got ringworm during that pediatric rotation, and that really was like, I cannot do anything that I'm gonna catch. I discovered that a pediatric residency simply wasn't for me. The plan that I'd followed for almost a decade of my life was suddenly undone. Fortunately, I had enjoyed several other rotations by this time. I didn't have to panic. I'd made a financially devastating mistake in pursuing medical school. I did, however, need to find a new passion. When I'm facing a big decision, I clean my whole house. I journal, making pros and cons, like lists, and I think back to many of the books I've read on leadership, personality tests, and even dragons most recently. There are lots of myths and stereotypes about psychiatrists, or shrinks as we like to be called. The most common is that we are psychologists, and we are most definitely not reading your mind or analyzing you when we have a social conversation. Fortunately, with decreasing stigma around mental health, more people do see us as real doctors, treating diseases that are rooted in biological factors impacting the brain. One stereotype of psychiatrists being bookish is not wrong. In fact, I encourage all of my residents to read at least 10 pages of something every day. Even reading fantasy or romance gives you a glimpse into the range of human behavior. And ultimately, understanding this range is the goal of psychiatrists. Whether we are seeing someone who has severe depression or psychosis, understanding behavior and remaining curious is our superhero strength. We also tend to enjoy personality tests because they help us with pattern recognition in human behavior. I particularly like the Enneagram personality test because it helps you understand your underlying motivations, outline the ways in which you grow, and the ways in which you are most likely to sabotage yourself. Ultimately, it allows you to be a curious and researcher about your own self. Has anybody taken the test and know what their number is? Okay, good. I am an Enneagram 3, the achiever, which I am most proud to report I share with one of the nation's greatest icons, Taylor Swift. Now, I know that many of you may not have the same passion for Taylor or consider yourself a Swiftie like I do, but no one can deny she is quite the achiever. Please do not get me wrong. I have not even come close to being the greatest songwriter in American history, in my humble opinion. But as an achiever, I know I'm competitive and strive for success. I am also aware that if I'm not mindful, my drive for accomplishment may overwhelm the reasons I chose this path in the first place and leave me feeling like my plate is too full. Many other personality trait models are helpful as well. If interested, another one I like is the 4 tendencies. It helps you recognize where you find motivation to figure out the best ways to interact with others and meet your goals. Please don't understand my intention here. Personality tests are not a recipe for your life. When you learn about the very different ways people view themselves and view the world, you then have more agency in your life. You can navigate professional and personal relationships with skill instead of confusion. Psychiatry residency, the 4 years training following medical school, was my very first real job. Now, since I was 16, I have worked at a pharmacy, as a swim instructor. I worked at a jewelry store here in Shreveport when I was in college, and my favorite job was at a local ice cream store in the summers. I was never afraid of work, but residency was my first experience in working with others in a corporate setting. It was hard. Nothing can quite prepare you for this journey, besides maybe watching The Office. And people are always shocked that like a hospital is just like The Office, I promise you. But remaining curious and treating these new interactions as a researcher of both yourself and one another is helpful. Learning about these concepts and remaining open-minded allows you to separate emotions from facts. We know from endless research in multiple settings, our emotions are often deceiving and only based on our own thoughts and background. Knowing yourself, seeing the difference between what you feel versus what you know, practicing empathy for others, gives you the courage to be your authentic self and interact with people in a healthy and positive way. I could probably give an entire address on being a woman in leadership, and there are plenty of people with more experience than I have. But I will say today is knowing my values, sticking with the facts, and remaining confident but curious has helped me navigate challenging times or when I had to say something that was unpopular. This has also garnered the respect of colleagues and leaders at UAMS, leading to my success. Staying curious about my professional interests was so important after I realized pediatrics wasn't my passion. I chose to be flexible and to change course. As I experienced different rotations after pediatrics, I consistently asked myself, can I see myself doing this for the rest of my life? I thought I could be satisfied in internal medicine, but I also thought it might feel a bit mundane to me year after year. So I kept myself open to possibilities with each new rotation. In July 2010, Violet was admitted to the inpatient psychiatric unit at UAMS. She was 22 years old and 25 weeks pregnant with her third baby, a girl. She had been using methamphetamine daily since she was 13 years old when her dad introduced her to the drug, and was admitted for depression and suicidal thoughts. She was open about her drug use, and her only social support were her grandparents, who actually lived here in Louisiana, and they had custody of her 2 older children. She did not want Child Protective Services to get involved when this baby was due and was asking for help. This was when I met Violet during my 3rd year psychiatry rotation. For those that don't know, the first 2 years of medical school, like I said, are all bookwork, and then you start your rotation. So psychiatry was my first rotation. And this was like the first time I really got to interact with real patients. I ended up spending a lot of time with Violet, learned about her childhood and the struggles of trying to quit a highly addicting drug. I remember being struck by her honesty, and similar to my time in Nicaragua, I was struck by the differences in our lives. But at the end of the day, recognizing that we are all doing the best with the hand we have been dealt. There was humanity in psychiatry that I had not experienced before. During her hospitalization, the treatment team had a really hard time finding mental health treatment resources for someone who was pregnant. And I was struck that attendings who had been working a lot longer than I had no idea what medication she could take while she was pregnant for her depression. I ended up finding myself thinking about her at the end of every day and wondering how many women are in similar situations. I thought to myself, this is something that society judges so harshly, but it's still continuing to happen. Why is that? How much of this might be a choice versus how much is it something else? Is she impacted by biological factors? Addiction during pregnancy is something that is sometimes stigmatized more than murder. So why do we know so little about it? Why do we have so few treatments for these patients? I found I couldn't let go of these questions because not only were they fascinating to me, but I got the urge to really want to help patients like her, and which ultimately set me on my career path and my first textbook chapter. This story, which has stuck with me for many years, as you can tell, leads me to my second point today, connection. I finished my psychiatry rotation and went on to surgery and pediatrics and internal medicine. And about a year goes by since I first met Violet, and I found myself at an away rotation in El Dorado, Arkansas, which is about 100 miles from Little Rock. It's actually pretty close to Shreveport. And when I came in for morning rounds that morning as a student and got the patient list, I realized that Violet was there in the ICU, intubated after overdosing and almost dying. When I entered her room, I found she is awake and pulling at the tubes going down her throat. And she was panicking as the staff, just with like tears running down her eyes, panicking, wanting to be extubated. When she noticed me, I could tell she recognized me. She calmed at the sight of a familiar face, and I walked over to her and grabbed her hand as the nurses extubated her. After she was able to talk, we talked about her pregnancy and her delivery. She tells me her baby is doing well and is living with her grandparents also here in Louisiana. She had relapsed on methamphetamine, and I could see the continued struggle that was a daily part of her life. That experience will always be with me. She had that connection with me as her doctor, and I had that connection with her as someone who impacted my decision moving forward. At that point, I knew I wanted to specialize in women's mental health, and I'm thankful for her in teaching me so many things. She helped me decide on my first 2 of professional passions. So now I knew that I wanted to focus on women's mental health, but how to go about it? How do I get connected? I found my calling, but I wanted a guiding approach for my work. A philosophy to ground myself and ask myself questions, a curiosity giving it a footing. There were not many scientific articles on women's mental health at that time. This was exciting on one hand because I got to be a trailblazer, but also frustrating because science is all about a methodical approach and learning from the past. So being the bookworm and researcher that I am, I turned to literature and podcasts to inform my practice and find the connection. One piece of this came to me from a book by journalist Andrew Solomon called The Noonday Demon, an Atlas of Depression. In it, he writes, "If you save the women, it has been said, they will in turn save the children. And so by tracing a chain of influence, one can save the country." There was the connection. I always had a passion for children, but needed a different avenue. This approach best summarizes my dedication to women's mental health. I treat the women and they go on to pour themselves into their children and their communities. Solomon wrote the words I just quoted to you after he met Folle Nguyen. She was a Cambodian woman who survived horrific atrocities under the Khmer Rouge. Her story is harrowing. She witnessed her 12-year-old daughter's murder. She was separated from her husband, not knowing if he lived or died. At one point, she was tied up and threatened with drowning in the mud. When she got the idea to lie to her captors, she told them that she had been a lover to a high-ranking general in the Rouge, saying he would be angry if she were killed. She was set free and told to run. One of the guards set her free and just said, "Run." And run she did with her baby in one arm and her 3-year-old in the other. She and her 3-year-old son survived in the jungles of Cambodia for 3 years by themselves. After her milk ran dry, her baby died of malnutrition in her arms. Foley eventually found her husband alive, but he had sustained head trauma and permanent brain damage at the hand of his captors. They lived together with their one surviving child in a refugee camp. Foley said, and I quote, "I saw women who were in very bad shape, many of them seemingly paralyzed, not moving, not talking, not feeding or caring for their own children. I saw that though they had survived the war, they were now going to die from their depression and post-traumatic stress." She coordinated with the aid workers and started a mental health clinic for those survivors in the camp. She developed a model of treatment that involved forgetting, working, and loving. She taught them coping skills to distract themselves from ruminating on the past. She encouraged them to engage in daily tasks like chores and childcare, as well as learn new professional skills. She started a sort of communal spa, teaching them to give one another manicures and pedicures, restoring gentle human contact. She said when her clients learn to combine these 3 practices, then they are ready to go in the world again. Later, she opened an orphanage that was staffed by many of the same women she had worked with in her clinic. She was nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize for her work. Reading her story, I thought about my own experience in pediatrics. I noticed that kids are pretty resilient. They bounce back. They are forgiving. But when their parents were struggling with poor coping skills or their own mental health conditions, I found myself wanting to give these kids a better chance. I recognized that I could have a meaningful impact on kids everywhere by treating their parents' mental illnesses, and most specifically their moms. To have a stable and healthy mom is the greatest gift that I can give. It is not widely known, but even the first year of life is one of your most important. Research shows that attachments and experiences that you have, even before age 1, predict your health outcomes over every decade of life, including diabetes, heart disease, and early death. Worse life experiences before age 1, worse health outcomes. This concept, improving mental health during pregnancy and postpartum, is my North Star that guides my clinical passion. It is the connection. Journalists Nicholas Kristof and Cheryl Woodun also speak to this concept in their book, Half the Sky. They conducted firsthand interviews with women across the globe and reviewed existing studies relating to the oppression of women. In study after study, they found that when women gain economic power closer to that of men, children benefit immensely. Nowadays, in developing nations, public health programs and humanitarian aid projects all show the same trends. When women hold the purse strings, children benefit. Now, this is not a statement on the current political ongoings, but the United States is no exception. Before the 19th Amendment afforded all women a voice in government, many individual states granted women the right to vote. Scholars report that the states where women had the right to vote spent about 35% more on public health compared to the states where only men voted. These public health funds led to as much as a 15% decline in child mortality. That means 15% less children died when women were able to vote. After the 19th Amendment was ratified in 1920, the child mortality reductions were even more profound in our country. My focus on women's mental health means I get to participate in a ripple effect where I treat the moms and aunts and grandmas who are raising the next generation of leaders in our country. I encourage you to find this connection in your own work. My commitment to this population has resulted in about 25 or so published studies. I've researched the use of prescription opioids during pregnancy, and I've researched maternal suicide, the second leading cause of maternal mortality. I've looked at outcomes of children born to mothers whose mental health conditions were treated and those who were untreated. Something I've learned along the way is the quantitative data alone isn't enough to make a meaningful impact. This makes me grateful for researchers who are also doing the qualitative work that is essential in science. I'm going to give you an example in healthcare that impacts the population I care for. Zulresso is a recently approved medication that works wonders for postpartum depression. It's actually the first psychiatric medicine that works on hormones. It takes 60 hours to administer through an IV and costs a whopping $30,000 that insurance may or may not pay for. And this does not include the cost of the doctors and the nurses and the inpatient care. That's just the medicine. It works better than almost any other treatment that we have for postpartum depression, but it's not accessible to most people. The quantitative findings are exciting, but we can't stop where we are because hardly anyone can access it. This is where our natural sciences, like biology and chemistry, must work alongside our social sciences, like economics and history. Human physiology and human behavior are interlaced. That connection is vital to understand. Part of the challenge of my work in psychiatry is the interplay between what is evidence-based and what is practical for my patients, many of whom have challenges with housing and transportation. These factors are in constant flux. So we discussed connection with your stakeholders, the people whose lives you are hoping to impact throughout your careers. I'd like to now draw your attention to another group you are connected to. Each of you here have something in common with myself. We each have people who encouraged us to follow our interests to where we are today. We all have mentors and role models, teachers and families and friends. Mentors in the broader sense are the people around us whose opinions we value. I believe there are two ingredients to achievement. First, your own willingness to try and fail. Next, your supporters who primed your willingness. Personally, I come from a family of farmers. I must confess I did not tell the whole truth earlier. My first job was before I was 10 years old. I grew up picking rocks in an endless hayfield, driving tractors, and often getting up early in the morning to do farm work. And when I complained, my dad would simply say, "It is what it is," and my grandfather would give me $20 after a long day's work. I gained my strong work ethic from my dad and his dad, and I am told I approach situations with a similar attitude of, it has to get done, so let's just do it. When I decided I wanted to be a physician, my family encouraged me. I was never told that being a doctor was out of my reach, despite coming from a rural town and having no medical professionals in my family before me. I'm still the only college graduate in my immediate family. Perhaps this is similar to your own experience, perhaps not. Either way, I can imagine you can think of mentors who've empowered you and shaped your overall approach to life. I recall struggling in my Physics 2 course here at Centenary, and I'm not even going to talk about organic chemistry. I vividly remember Dr. Jeff Trahan, who unfortunately is no longer with us after passing a few years ago, spent a significant amount of time tutoring me after class, going over the concepts and the equations. He was patient and never seemed frustrated with me, although I was very frustrated with myself. His encouragement and willingness to work with me helped me reframe the course as something I was capable of. His engagement fueled my success and was one of the many professors here that had a lasting impact on my life. My own decision to choose learning over pride and ask for his help was also important. Dr. Shearhart was another mentor to me, speaking calmly and gently to my 22-year-old self after I missed the MCAT score I was aiming for the first time. By the way, this was also on the Nicaragua trip when I think I called my mom. She told me the results and I cried. And this was on a payphone because cell phones did not work internationally at that point. With tears coming down my face, he said, "So you take it again, right?" And here I stand before you, not only getting into medical school and finishing my 9th year on faculty after thinking I was doomed, but having had so many mentors over the years who encouraged me and kept me going on my path. Their impact really can't be summarized in words, and these are the connections that brought me here today. Mentors are also the people we trust to tell us the hard truths. They can challenge us to be better, to do better. Their personalities often complement ours so that we are somehow both aligned and always in a bit of conflict, because I think that's just more interesting. One funny mentor story is that when I was a new psychiatry intern, my attending physician, I had just met him. It was the very first time. I was very nervous. When you're an intern and you're meeting your attending, you get super nervous. And the very first time he looked at me, he said, "Are you on drugs?" I was flabbergasted and I was worried. What on earth had I done to make him think I was doing drugs at work? So I told him, "No, I'm not on drugs. What makes you ask that?" He told me my pupils were quite dilated. Nobody had ever told me that before. So I went to my optometrist at my next appointment. I said, "Are my pupils dilated?" And she's like, "Oh yeah, they're very dilated compared to normal people." And so that's when I learned that. To this day, I cannot bear to be outside with sunglasses, and I constantly argue with my husband about the amount of lights we have on in the house. Dr. Stowe went on to become an irreplaceable mentor to me, teaching me much of what I know about women's mental health. He and I shared a lot of laughs about the "are you on drugs" comment over the years. I think in a way he was challenging me to see now how I would handle distress, how I would handle being embarrassed. The best mentors recognize that growth often requires discomfort as a catalyst. Peers can also be mentors when you lean on each other's strengths. Thinking critically means not always thinking alone in your head. When I have a clinical conundrum, I involve my colleagues. There are pros and cons to every philosophy, and one of the drawbacks of rugged individualism is the loneliness of it. It is quite limiting to think about a problem alone versus connecting with others to solve a problem collaboratively. This culture of collaboration is one thing that many college students as Gen Z are probably even better at than I am. Don't lose that as you progress in your careers. Another benefit of acknowledging your independence with your colleagues is the fact that we are all finite human beings. No matter how intelligent and ambitious we are, there's still only 24 hours in every day. We must be strategic with our time and energy, knowing yourself, your primary goals and dreams, and establishing boundaries accordingly helps you develop that intentional strategy. This approach can also be quite freeing. I often think to myself, my job as an inpatient psychiatrist is to stabilize this patient with a few interventions at my disposal, and then help them develop a solid outpatient plan. No more, no less. We all have a goal and a dream that is bigger than ourselves. When you connect that and focus on it, you can live a full and rich life. The third connection is relationships with friends, families, social clubs, churches, etc. The longest longitudinal study on the health and happiness of relationships is the Harvard study of adult development. otherwise known as the grant study. Sahil Bloom writes about this in his new book, The 5 Types of Wealth. The grant study has been active for the past 85 years and started as following 286 undergraduate Harvard College men and their families, as well as 456 boys from Boston's most troubled families and neighborhoods. Today, they have followed more than 1,300 people who were descendants of the original cohort, and every 2 years collect data on life satisfaction, health, mood, and more. Its most important takeaway is this: relationships are quite literally everything. Strong relationships are the best predictors of life satisfaction and have a direct impact on physical and mental health. Studies have shown that teenagers and young adults are spending 70% less time with their friends in person than they did 20 years ago, which can ultimately impact their health. This is something that I keep in my own mind as I'm constantly distracted by the digital world that can corrode relationships with the people that I'm most physically closest to. As Bloom reminds us, proximity to people you love is worth more than any job will ever pay you. Human connection allows you to thrive. Through curiosity and connection, I am so grateful to have found my twofold passions: women's mental health and professional mentorship. Finding them is only half the battle. Keeping them is the other half. I will leave you with some final thoughts that keep me living my best and wonderful life. If I'm absorbed by this work all the time, what's left for me and my family? I can't recommend balance if I don't practice it myself. For me, boundaries are the key to my balance. My professional and ethical boundaries protect my ability to continue this work year after year. Many people, when they find out I'm a psychiatrist, almost always say, "I could never do that, that seems too hard." Or, "How do you just listen to people's sad stories all day?" Or, and probably the most common, "I probably need to see you," or at least someone in my family does. Finding common ground with my patients is important to me. Listening to their stories is important. I thrive when I establish genuine connections with my patients and they feel validated and understood. I have learned so much about myself, especially during the hard times. Despite this, beginning a personal crusade against anyone and everyone who stigmatizes these women or mental health is something I'm not interested in. At the end of the day, it is their stories, not mine. I prefer to author scientific studies and enlighten other healthcare professionals through teaching and learning. My style is to advocate for these patients in a holistic, sustainable way, to teach residents and students the importance of curiosity and connection. This means I give them my full attention when I'm at work, and I protect my personal and family time when I'm away. It is worth thinking how you will do this in your own career. In the wise words of Taylor Swift, "Band-Aids don't fix bullet holes." To me, these lyrics speak to the scale of the world's problems. We can't fix everything because we are finite and the problems are massive. But when we focus on ourselves and the things we have control of, we can start mending ourselves, our families, and our communities. I have the power to make these choices about my work-life balance. I may not always love my choices, but I do recognize that I have options. We are all better off when we are realistic about our limitations as human beings working within imperfect systems. My hope for each of you in this room is a sustainable, successful career instead of a brief, bright burnout. Just a quick, I think I would be remiss without talking about this today. So with a quick show of hands, who in this room is concerned about the state of research funding in our country today? I think it's about everybody. I imagine the NIH, CDC, FDA, and USAID cuts have weighed heavily on us all the past few months. You may be feeling a sense of, if we don't have the means to pay for this research, then what are we even talking about here at this conference? I titled this talk, A Research Mindset, very intentionally. This mindset equips you beyond treating research solely as a job. A mindset is a way of life. These tools of curiosity and connection will help us weather this storm. It comes down to how we manage uncertainty. The floor beneath us is shifting every day. It is up to all of us to stay curious about what can be done about the situation. We have the power to forge connection with our colleagues, our friends, and our communities. It reminds me of other times when we saw huge advancements that were made with the challenge of the COVID pandemic. When we were forced to rethink everyday things, we had to come up with new solutions. Some were for the better. So I encourage you to ask yourself, what are my values, and how can I create common ground with others on these values? Who do I notice already doing the work, and how can I join in? As anthropologist Zora Neale Hurston said, research is formalized curiosity. It is poking and prying with purpose. The purpose is what drives us, the connections that keep us going, and curiosity is the wonder that energizes our work and ultimately our lives. To the faculty, we should always be training the next class after us to be better than we are. We train them to be our replacements, yes, but we also want them to stand on our shoulders just as we stood on the shoulders of those who have come before us. We must always look to grow that curiosity in ourselves and those that we teach. And the connections you have fostered while working on these research projects that today is apparent. Even the seemingly small connections that are just part of my job often have lasting impact. Often these small things are the greatest. To all the students who have put in hard work and participated in these research projects, congratulations on reaching the finish line. And I hope that both curiosity and connections with your peers and faculty have led the way. As you encounter uncertainty in the future, questioning yourselves, or possibly being underestimated by others, I hope you will remember the wise words of Ted Lasso. Be curious, not judgmental. Judgments are so often a hallmark of fear, where curiosity is a mark of bravery and openness. When others underestimate us, it is more about them than it is about us, because it shows a fundamental lack of curiosity on their part. To all of you, including my own daughter Evelyn, who is here with me today, I hope that as you continue to gain experience and eventually find yourselves in research, leadership, education, or mentoring positions of your own, you will continue to stay curious, always striving to be a better version of yourself, and encourage those around you to stay curious and stay connected. You are our future, and it is so bright. I will forever remember this experience, and thank you for your time.
Anybody have any questions for Dr. Coker?
Or I would say arguments against anything I said.
And I have a mic here that we can use. Or you can yell. Maybe use the mic.
What's your favorite Taylor Swift song off of Portrait Poet?
Oh man, thank you for at least bringing it to an album.
Yeah.
And not just of all time.
I can't just go through the whole discography.
Okay, my favorite, probably Who's Afraid of Little Old Me.
That's a good one.
Or Black Dog.
Another good one.
Clean is my favorite song of all time.
I don't like microphones. Thank you. This was really good. I really enjoyed this. I'm also a seminary grad, and so it was just really great to hear your perspective.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Were you able to ever follow up with that patient?
No, I wasn't. Yeah, that's a totally real story. None of that was made up, and it is ingrained in my brain forever. And I always tell my medical students when they are in their third year of training that, like, I think that everyone has their own patient story that kind of develops their passion. I've not met many doctors who don't have that patient who will be forever ingrained in their memory. I obviously have other ones too after practicing for many years that have been really impactful on my life, but there's always that one story.
And I guess my last thing is for any of our students that are going into the healthcare profession, whether it's doctors or speech path or OT, something that you wish you knew and that you now know on this side of the coin as an educator and as somebody that has residents follow through with them and so forth.
I think what I would say, because I think people are always shocked at, like when I compared the healthcare industry to the office, I think people are shocked, and I was shocked. I think coming from a place like this, and it was 15 years ago when I was here, so I don't know what it's like now, but we were pretty competitive with each other, I think. We pushed each other as peers, and I think people who go into pre-med or healthcare are kind of type A in general. But all of that starts falling apart when you're working with colleagues. And so I think understanding that not everyone is going to have the same expectations that you are going to have, not everybody is going to work the same way that you are working, which I don't think is just a healthcare thing. I think that was the hardest part of residency for sure, is managing that, when you come in on a call shift and the person before you didn't see a single patient and they hand you 12 patients to see. So those types of things, I think, were more challenging than the work itself sometimes.
I'm pretty loud. I'll just.
Yeah, go ahead.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I am not going into medical field, but I wonder. I was going to ask, what advice would you have for someone going into after undergrad, going to graduate school, medical school, yada yada?
Job market, I don't think that's talked about enough. And even within medicine, I think too, now it's even more important, is I think it's super important to pick something that has a thriving job market and that you see is going to sustain you for the next 20 years. I hate saying that, but I will say that. So my medical students, they get dang good. And when I tell them, if you go into OB, good luck finding a job. And people don't recognize that is also within physicians. The specialized ENT doctors, there's one in every state. That's all that the state needs, because that's how many patients need that type of doctor. So, obviously don't ever let anybody tell you that you can't do something. Because I was told as a medical student that I could never be a women's mental health doctor because nobody wanted that. And that's all I do. So I wouldn't say that, but I would just say pick something. That would be my advice, is pick something. And it can be niche, but then you got to work really hard to set yourself apart if you're going to do niche things.
If there are no,
I was going to say, I have a question, if no one has a question. You're talking about having a mentally taxing job, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that you set clear boundaries and somehow perhaps leave that at work and come home. How do you do that? I mean, some folks might even have, a difficult day on campus, a difficult day at work, whatever that is. Maybe this is something you're still figuring out, but how do you care emphatically about what you spend your day doing,
Mm-hmm.
but not let your entire rest of your day be feeling upset, caring emphatically at home about that thing?
Yeah, that's
what do you do for yourself, or what maybe do others do?
It's a great question, and don't get me wrong, I don't have it all figured out. And I think what I would reframe your question just a little bit, and that we all have hard days. I have really hard days. I forgot last week, or maybe last Thursday, I had a really tough day. And I came home and my husband knew I had a really tough day. So it's not that I never come home and have hard times, but they aren't very often, what I would say. It's very rare that happens. Two things. One, psychiatry residency teaches us to separate our patients from ourselves, because without it, we can't be psychiatrists. It is a hard job to listen to people's stories all day. And I work in an inpatient setting where it's the most sick people are coming in the worst situations usually. So part of residency training is teaching you that. So I've had 4 years of consistent training to get better at that. The other thing that I encourage my residents to think about is that being a psychiatrist is not who I am. It has nothing to do with me as Jessica. I'm Dr. Coker at work, I'm Jessica at home, and I'm Jessica with my family. And so psychiatrist is my job. It's not who I am deep down. So I think we have to find that separation, in that, like, you know, your job as a college professor or a teacher is not who you are at home. And that allows me to kind of separate those two. When I was in early training, I always tell my interns, I work with interns, so I work with, like, the very first, July 1 is like, don't come to the hospital because I have an intern working with me and they're not very good. So I work with interns, and I tell them something I did, and this can apply to any career you go into. I think it's important. This doesn't have to be medical, is like, I just pretended I was an actress every day. Because you kind of have to, like, fake it till you make it to some degree when you're, like, stepping into a corporate world or a new job, or you're fresh out of school and you have no clue what's going on, is like, just put that hat on, just fake it, and eventually it becomes natural. So I get really good at switching that hat.
All right, since we've delved into popular culture now, I have to ask, I'm sure you get asked this all the time.
Yeah.
Are you watching The Pit?
Yeah, I have watched half of it, yes. I have watched it. It is a good show. It is very, how I would describe, I would say the personalities are very accurate. So all of those personalities are definitely there, and so I appreciate that part of The Pit, because it is pretty accurate on how people talk and treat each other. So you do have to have a pretty tough, thick skin to get through medical training, I would say that. It is not easy. Residents are often crying in my office. But I would say that I wish they would have spread it out a little bit, because every hour is like what you might see in an entire year as far as the conditions go and, like, the stress of it. I would not say it's that high-paced and stressful on a continual basis.